Alright, we will now begin. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the National University Computing Society's another workshop, Acing the Coding Interview, Zero to Hero. My name is Mazali Nadeem and I, along with my colleague, will be hosting this event today. Our speaker for the day is Mr. Mohammed Hassan Khan, who is the Senior Software Engineer at Google. Not only that, he is the top 1% C-sharp contributor at Stack Overflow, and he's quite popular on LinkedIn as well. So our session is divided in two phases. First of which, we'll have 5 pre-decided questions that we took from you from the registration forms. The second phase will include a live question answer session that will be taken from in the chat box and will be read out to the speaker himself. But before we begin, I would like to invite Abdul Wadud Wasim from Team Graphics to recite a few verses from the Holy Quran.
Assalamu alaikum everyone.
Wa alaikum assalam. Wadud, you're quite audible. Please, please begin.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والضحى والليل إذا سجى ما ودعك ربك وما قلى وللآخرة خير لك من الأولى ولسوف يعطيك ربك فترضى ألم يجدك يتيما فآوى ووجدك ضالا فهدى ووجدك عائلا فأغنى فأما اليتيم فلا تقهر وأما السائل فلا تنهر وأما بنعمة ربك فحدث صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah. Assalamu alaikum, sir. Can you hear me now?
Walaikum assalam. Yes, I can hear you.
All right. Sir, we will now begin with the first phase, and I'll read out the 5 questions that we've chosen, one after the other, and you will then be speaking about them. So let's begin with the first question. What skills should one work on other than programming to get into influential or world-renowned companies? If you may, sir.
Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Uh, So, if you are looking for a position as a software developer, then all you need to do is, in terms of preparing for interview, you need to prepare for data structures and algorithms. Certain companies also ask you questions about CS fundamentals, but it's not very common. Other than that, there is one culture fit interview. So I shared some resources earlier on how to prepare for the interview. You can go through those resources. That's all you need for the preparation. There is a phase before interview, which is getting shortlisted. And I think there's a question afterwards, what you can do
Right,
to
sir.
get
Could you
more
elaborate?
visibility. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I can't hear you.
Hello? Am I audible?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah, I
All
can
right.
hear you now.
All right. Thank you. We'll proceed to the next question, which is what are some of the elements on the CV that help an individual stand out from a competitive pool of applicants? So,
Right. So there are two things. One is, see, it's also related to the previous question also. Software development is obviously just one field that you go into. Whatever field that you're interviewing for, it's important for you to know what skills are necessary for that particular uh, role, right? And so I'll give you information about software development, but for other fields, you have to speak to a person who's in the industry in that particular role, has been there for a few years, and if they've interviewed or has been an interviewer, so that person is more appropriate to give you specific tips related to the role that you're interested in. But software developers, anything that shows that you're passionate about this field, right? And things that you wouldn't expect a normal person to do who's just graduated out of CS because somebody told them that CS is something you should be doing. For example, participating in programming competitions, having your some projects online on GitHub or any other open source hosting website, and having your own website or another your software that's published on App Store or anywhere else that they can look at, software competitions, participation in that. And if you're fresh out of college, then your GPA can stand you out, but doesn't matter after once you become an experienced engineer, nobody asks you your GPA. But for fresh grads, it does kind of weigh in. And basically, yeah, doing things like that, if having a well-written resume is also important. You may have a lot of skills, but if your resume is not relevant, I've seen in resumes students mentioning things that are not relevant to the role that they're applying. For example, if you're applying as a software developer, what societies you were part of or what other hobbies you have are not relevant. So I also shared some resources on writing a good resume that you can look at. And then other than that, just plain software development activities besides your education are something that can stand you up.
right. I'll move on to the next question, which is the pathways in a computer science degree are often too vast and interesting at the same time. How did you keep yourself focused at software engineering, especially knowing when there are so many emerging fields out there in the market?
Right. See, for choosing your ideal career, you have to look at three things that you're interested in, things you're good at, and things that are going to pay your bills, right? Intersection of these three, just imagine three circles in your mind. And if you have intersection of these three circles somewhere, that's the thing that you should remain focused on. There'll be a lot of interesting fields that keep coming in, but like you can't be jumping around from one field to the other just because it's hot right now. You have to look at your own, skill set or what your interests are, and if it's going to pay well also, right? So as a software developer, my primary interest is in software development, and that's why I'm not too enthusiastic about anything else coming in, uh, because I want to stay focused on things that I'm good at, as well as I'm personally interested in. It's paying me well, alhamdulillah. So this is what anybody should be looking at, what their own competence is or aptitude is, and just focus on that one area. Jumping around, changing your field is only helpful if you're not satisfied with what you gotten yourself into. If you think you can't do it, this is not your type of thing, then there's no problem in switching roles and finding something else that's more relevant to your interests.
All right, sir. If you allow me to expand this question,
Yeah.
what if my certain field of interest is going obsolete or is about to go obsolete? How do I, shift myself to something else that is rather, going to last long?
I mean, how do you know if it's going obsolete?
Uh,
What's your criteria of determining that? I've, I've people come up to me and told me, that people are saying whatever you're into is getting obsolete, and you can't be changing your career on say so of others. The way you gauge if something is in demand is go to a job site and look at how many jobs you have for that particular role, right? And if you still have jobs and you're going to have it for a coming future, then there's like, if something going to be obsolete after your lifetime is over, then doesn't matter, right? So I just want to emphasize that things don't become obsolete so quickly as people imagine them to be, or it's just based on say so of others. So one thing, for example, the scope of being a manual test engineer is reducing over time because automation is increasing. So in those cases, for example, I would suggest the person to learn programming and get into automated testing, right? Because that's going to remain. You can't have software that does not have any kind of testing happening on it. There are some companies where testing is done by software engineers themselves, and they don't have dedicated test engineers. But there's always, a set of companies where they can't afford to have engineers being the testers also. It's mostly common in consulting companies. So inshallah, the test engineers are going to have scope there in those kind of companies, especially if they're doing automated testing. So if you're in a field that you think the scope of it is decreasing, speak to somebody who's been in that field for like say 10 years or 15 years. They'll have a better idea and they'll tell you what path you can follow to either move into an adjacent field where you can utilize similar skills, if not the same, and you're still, in your own interest area, in your own competence area. I hope that helps.
Absolutely right. I'll just move on to question number 4 now, which is knowing that each company has different frameworks and tools. How did you adapt to those while switching from companies like Amazon to Google, etc.? Like, yeah, we have seen that you've shifted to so many companies. We're quite sure there were different frameworks in each of them. So, if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I recommend software developers to not be tied to one particular framework or, technology in general or programming language. That's something you need to have as an attitude if you want to keep the doors open for opportunities for yourself. Especially in big companies, the vast majority of the jobs are for generalists. People who can see, if you're smart, you can learn any tool or technology. Learning a new language or learning, if you work with a few languages, picking up a new language doesn't take more than a few days. Really, you may not become very proficient in it, but you can read code and you can write code, right? Because you're basically translating uh, your vocabulary of one language into another language. The constructs are similar. It's just the way of the syntax is different. Uh, Same goes with the framework. The high level concepts of the frameworks are same. You just have to figure out how to do the same thing in this framework and you can look up the reference documentation uh, or just search on internet to figure out how, because see, most important skill for you as a software engineer is to be able to solve the problem. Okay? And you need to understand the high level patterns of solving those problems. And the specific technologies that you use, they can change. You can always pick up, for example, I know MVC is a concept, right? I need to write a controller and a view and a model. Now, whichever MVC framework you're using, at the end of the day, you're writing these three components and you know what goes in each of these layers, right? So it just becomes a matter of figuring out how do you translate the idea that you have in your mind into specific technology. Your productivity initially is a bit low because you spend a lot of time translating. Like it's similar to if you know how to drive a car, right? Most cars are similar. It's just that some controls are here and there, and just have to get used to uh, you know the uh, the way the car is and position yourself accordingly. So similarly, if you are familiar with the ideas and the way to solve problems, then it's not very difficult. It's just you're a bit slow in the beginning, and then your pace picks up. It takes around in any company, it takes around 6 months for you to become fully productive, because it's not just the technology or the language that you have to pick up. The bigger challenge is to understand the code base and the specific software, because that's more complex. Technologies and languages, it's a simple matter of translating from one vocabulary to another. But understanding the code base and understanding the existing software that you're going to be start uh, contributing to, that is more difficult, because these things are much more unique. They're solving different problems. That's where most of the time is spent, and that's what we should be concerned about, and not be, I don't recommend anyone to just limit themselves to being a mobile developer or Android engineer or Java programmer. It doesn't make sense. Like, for example, if your job requires you to one day use a technology that has a library only available in that technology, you can say, oh no, I'm only a Java programmer. I cannot use C Sharp, and I don't care if this library is not available in Java. I'm not going to work on this. This attitude is not helpful for you as a software developer. So uh, the more flexible you are, the mindset, if you have the right mindset, it won't be as much difficult. I think the barrier is in the mind more than it's in the reality of working with these technologies.
Absolutely right. I'll move on to question number 5 now, which is, what was your programming mindset or attitude that helped you get into such world-renowned companies?
Okay, so I've spoken about this in the past also. You can't pinpoint and one thing and say, because I did X, that's the reason why I got my job in X, Y, and Z company. Uh, as Muslims, we know that risk is in the hands of Allah, right? And what we need to do is on our end, just work on different things. Be open, like for example, I said, be open to picking up, working with any technology. Don't leave your comfort zone. Obviously, if you want to uh, uh, clear the interview, you have to prepare for data structures and algorithms interview. Without doing the preparation, it's very hard for you to clear the interview. Uh, knowing what they're looking for, studying their culture, and having a good relevant resume, uh, having side projects online, the better your profile is, the more chances you have for getting visibility. But realize that you can't pick one thing and say, because I did X or because I had this mindset, this is why I got this job. Because for every one thing that you pick, there are thousands of people who have that one thing more than you have, right? For example, if I say I'm really uh, I'm really good at data structure and algorithm, which I'm not. I'm not a data structure and algorithms guru, but I know there are a lot of people who are much better than me, and they have not cleared the interview, right? That's just the fact of life. That's the reality that we have to realize. It's not in our control 100%. All we can do is just figure out what is required for the for clearing the interview or getting shortlisted. Make sure we fulfill all those criterias and then apply. And if it happens, happens. If it doesn't happen, alhamdulillah, there's so many companies. It's not just end of the world where, if you get refused by one company. Like I applied in Google multiple times, Amazon multiple times, and Microsoft multiple times, right? And if there was something special about me that would have gotten me this job, then that would have happened the first time, right? Because I'm the same person applying multiple times. Okay? So for example, let's say if I said I had the skill X or mindset X, because of this I got the job. In all these attempts, my that X did not change. I'm the same person. I'm just preparing and applying again, right? So you can't pinpoint one thing and say that one thing is what you need. There is basically no shortcut to any kind of achievement. You apply, you do what's in your hand, and then you leave the rest to Allah and let Him decide what is good for you.
Right, sir. That brings us to the end of the first phase. Before we move on to phase 2, could you share with the audience about any of the projects that you're working on right now, or something that you've worked on at Google or Microsoft?
Right. So Right now, I'm part of core Arc++ Chrome OS team. Chrome OS is the operating system by Google, and within it, it has the capability to run Android apps. That technology is called Arc++. So I work in the Arc++ core team, where our job is to make this integration of Android apps with Chrome OS operating system smooth. And basically, we run Android operating system inside a virtual machine or a container. We use different technologies and different versions of the operating system. So since joining, I've been in this company for about a year, and my role has mostly been stabilizing the bootstrap of Android, and if there are any errors, making it easy for analyzing those errors and giving a more useful error to the user, and figuring out the specific reason why the bootstrap of Android failed, because it's not successful every time. So this is the main area that I'm focused on right now, is to improve the stability of Android running on top of Chrome OS.
Right, sir. Since the first phase is now over, I will be signing off, and Sayyid Asnan Abid Bukhari, who is another workshop officer, he will be joining for the second phase.
Excuse me.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, Hasnan, over to you, and thank you, sir.
Assalamualaikum everyone. It's me Sayyid Hasnan Abdul Bukhari, and I'll be managing this for the second phase, in which we'll take your questions. So if you have any question to ask from Sir Hassan, just please type in the comments. So I'll read it out. So sir, if you allow, may I begin this phase?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So, sir, the first question we have is from Abdullah Jafar, and he's asking that considering international companies don't actively look for Pakistanis, is there a forum or some LinkedIn page to which you can subscribe to find international opportunities?
So there are two things you can do. Is first of all, for students, uh, all of you should have presence on LinkedIn, all right? And having presence on Stack Overflow also helps. Doing community contribution, these things increase your visibility, right? Just like I mentioned earlier, having open source projects, and whatever you build, whether for your university or your personal interest, just put it on GitHub. So that increases your visibility. You can have on Stack Overflow, you can have your resume there. Increase the areas where you're present. Stack Overflow resume, LinkedIn, having a resume, well written resume. Figure out how to write the resume first. Then you go to specific companies that you're interested in and look for jobs there. Obviously, there are job sites that you can also subscribe to. Different job sites have this option where you can create a filter and have them email you every time the new opportunity is posted, so you can actively apply. You also have this option available for like Google career site. I think other Amazon, Microsoft might also have it. Besides this, I recommend on LinkedIn following the recruiters and hiring managers of any company that you're interested in. It doesn't have to be, these big companies. I want to emphasize that students should not be limiting their, see, I did not graduate out of college and directly go to Google. Like there are 13 years in between, 12 to 13 years in between. So fresh graduates should not limit their, first of all, their opportunities only to X, Y, and Z company. Go on LinkedIn, look in whatever companies you're interested in, whether they're local or international. Just don't look down on Pakistani companies. That's where most of my career was built. That's how I learned software development, became a software engineer, then moved on to other companies. So first of all, have a broad pool of companies that you're interested in. Follow the hiring managers and recruiters. You can search for recruiters and hiring managers using the LinkedIn search feature. All right. And you don't have to connect with people you don't know. You can, like, there are very few people who are going to accept your connection request if they don't know you, right? But you can always follow them. What happens is Google is not very common for a hiring manager to say, for example, that I'm hiring. But Amazon is very common for hiring managers and team members to say there is a position in our team and if you're interested, send me a resume and whatnot. Recruiters mostly usually post jobs on LinkedIn and ask people to contact them. Having a human to speak to directly is much more helpful than submitting the resume online. But obviously, you should always apply online because there is a possibility of you getting shortlisted that way also. However, do that always. Besides that, if you can find a recruiter or hiring manager for the specific team you're interested in or just you want to know what opportunities are there, just start following them and inshallah you'll notice them. I found the opportunity in Microsoft by somebody telling me to apply to a tweet that was posted by hiring manager in Microsoft. So on Twitter also, I don't recommend people wasting times on following trends and just posting on random hashtag or things like party hori and whatnot. As a fresh graduate, should be focused on following engineers and hiring managers on LinkedIn and Twitter. Instagram is useless. You can't be looking at pictures to find opportunities. But um, if you're on Twitter, on LinkedIn, or these different social networks, then follow these engineers and hiring manager and recruiters. That's how you'll get opportunity to contact them in person. Not sorry, not in person and meeting them physically in person, but on you can message them directly, and that's more helpful. Besides, obviously, following the jobs on their job boards.
Thanks a lot, sir. Sorry for the internet glitch I had. The second question we have is from Mikhail Anwar, and he's asking that best resources approaches for getting better at dynamic programming and trees. I've read portions of CTCI and solved 50 plus questions on lead code, but I still struggle with almost every new question I come across, especially on medium and hard level.
Hmm. So I see going after number of questions on lead code is not very helpful. Like I have probably solved say, for 17 questions on lead code. What I've personally found helpful is first of all, if you're at the very minimum, read one or two books on data structure and algorithms. Okay. And when you're reading a book, don't read it like a novel or a story, just where you just go through it. Make sure what you're reading, you understand it. Go very slow. Read it multiple times until you read. Sometimes the author will explain that this is the problem, this is how I'm solving it. You're not supposed to memorize the solution for that specific problem. If you do that, you can do 100 question, 200 question, and next problem you'll be stuck again. You have to understand the mindset behind it, why this solution works for this problem. And then you start to build the patterns of thinking that help you in solving the problems that are similar to whatever problem you studied. Okay, so those patterns of thinking you can extract by trying to figure out what the thought process behind it, behind the solution mentioned is. Read articles, read books. Other than that, doing mock interviews, that has helped me a lot. When you're in mock interviews, you can interview your friends who are good at solving this kind of problems that you're trying to learn, or you can also interview random people online. There are various sites for that. The benefit of doing a mock interview is that when you ask the same question from somebody else, you get to learn because the other person has to not just write code, they have to explain why they think the solution is going to work. And there you focus on picking their, the thought process, how they're approaching the problem, how they're figuring out the solution. And then you use those patterns, those portions of thought process of other people. You harvest the thought process of multiple people and you build your own, pattern recognition that you use to solve the problem. But knowing the theory is critical, not memorizing the specific solutions which are not, it's not helpful, but understanding why a certain solution works. It also helps to have the same solution as it also helps to have different solutions for the same problem. So one thing that I did with my friends was to have a WhatsApp group. You can make a WhatsApp group with 4 or 5 people who are learning to solve these problems. And you pick one problem, put it in the group, and have everybody try to solve it for in next 1 or 2 days. After 2 days, everybody has to come in and share how they solve the problem. So then you have 5 different ways, or people solve the problem, whatever, however many people you have in your group, and then you can try to harvest their thought process, why they thought this was the solution, and that will improve your own pattern recognition for solving these kinds of problems.
Thank you, sir. Got it. The the next question we have is from Sayyida Rimsha Iftikhar, and she's asking that how does one identify that he or she is a job person as opposed to a person who is interested in doing things independently?
I am not sure what a job person is. What does that mean? Can you clarify?
I guess she's saying that how can we find our interest that uh, either we are good for a job or we are a freelancer.
Freelancers are also doing work, like they're not freelancer because they don't know how to do their job. If you want to know if you are, see, your interests, when you're doing your bachelor's, you are exposed to different fields. That's where you figure out if you have assignments for, databases or software programming or whatever. This is one in place where you get exposure to different kinds of activities and figure out where your interests are. Other than that, you can speak to professionals in the industry. Doing an internship helps, where you're exposed to different roles. You interact with PM, you interact with testers, you interact with software developers, yeah, network engineers and whatnot. You figure out, which field that you want to study more, which subject is something that you grasp more easily or enjoy studying, whatnot. And then you try to do some practical work in that kind of area. Nobody is like, just because somebody wants to be a software developer does not mean they have to be naturally good at it. This is not a skill that you're born with, but you work on it. The most important thing is that anything that you're interested in, you are willing to spend time in learning it, right? You can't say, for example, let's say I was interested in software development, but I couldn't write a good program, so I quit it. There is obviously some work that has go into becoming better at anything you're interested in, right? So it's like, for example, if you decide that you're not healthy and you want to go to gym and start exercising, right? Your interest lies in your motivation to become better there. And then when you start exercising, the first day you're gonna feel pains and it's gonna be difficult to lift weights or do your exercise or whatnot. And you might not be able to sleep well. But when you realize at night that, all the pain that you're going through is worth it because you want to get better at it, you want to become healthier, the next day you naturally your body also becomes more resistant to pain, and you become better at lifting weights and whatnot. Uh, that process you have to go through regardless, whichever field you're interested in. The only thing is that you're willing to spend in the energy. If you think the effort is worth it, then you continue investing in it and to become better in it. That does answer your question.
I hope this answered her question. Rimsha, if it's clear, if it isn't clear, just mention in the message. We'll read out it again. And said, then we have a good question from Raja Salman, and he's asking that how can I tell if during the interview my replies are actually valid? What are the interview is looking for, rather than the interview just agreeing to what I say to carry the interview along? Am I on the right track?
See, every interviewer is different. So you can't have one general rule to figure out, because these are, at the end of the day, these are humans that are talking to you. Some interviewers will tell you, I think this may not work because of this reason. If some interviewer is not giving you any hints, just letting you speak and letting you go in the wrong direction, I think it's not a good interviewer. That person, they have to guide you guide your thought process if you're going in the wrong direction. Uh, One thing that's important, whether you're solving a programming problem or design problem, whatnot, you can validate your own thought process also, right? Now, testing is as important as solving the problem. So you see, okay, so this was our requirement, and this would be solved by X, Y, Z. And if you wrote code, you can pass and test data and see if this works, things like that. But if they're a good interviewer, they'll also help you, because at the end of the day, they're not going to quiz you or pin you down. Obviously, there are some interviewers who have the wrong mindset and they're just looking to find faults and not guide you through the process. But you have other people also who give you hints on how it's going. If you're not able to solve the problem at all, like, you would know that uh, you're not doing well, right? If you know what you're doing, and if it's passing the test that you're doing on it, whether it's your design problem or coding problem, then you can assume that you're going on the right track. You should always, obviously, communication is an important skill. You should uh, communicate and give space to the interviewer to add their own comments. You can't keep going on continuously, non-stop, and not let them speak. So go slow, explain your thought process, make sure they understand what you're saying, and let them comment if they have any comment. Don't be very defensive. If you're defensive, then you won't be able to listen to them even if they're trying to tell you something. Right? So for example, if they ask you to think over something again, that's a hint that maybe, there's something wrong.
Got it. I hope this answers the question. So the next question we have is from Roha Kabir, and she's asking that what is the significance of competitive programming in the career pathway of a computer science student?
Competitive programming is different than learning data structures and algorithms. Competitive programming, so if you look at the problems in, programming competitions, they are more wordy, more confusing, and you have to solve the riddle more than writing code for the specific problem. Interview problems are much simpler in general, in my experience. What program? So if somebody is doing competitive programming and participating in competitions, whatnot, they'll generally be better than other people in solving those problems. That's a given, but I don't think that's a requirement. Having programming competitions mentioned on your resume increases your chances of being shortlisted, because this shows at least you're skilled at this thing that they need for clearing interview. So they want to focus on candidates that have higher chances of passing the interview. That's helpful in that sense, and getting your resume shortlisted or are generally becoming better at solving problems. But I don't consider it as a requirement. Like, you could have no competitive programming experience, but generally be good at uh, solving data structure and algorithm problems, and still clear the interview.
Got it. So the next question is from Raja Salman, and he's asking that please guide how to establish a presence on GitHub, LinkedIn, Stack Overflow, rather than just spamming my profile with unimportant items.
Yeah, don't spam anywhere. In GitHub, GitHub, whatever projects you make, you can just upload them, right? There's Don't have like 100 or 150, 200 projects that are one line scripts. Don't spam. Like, your recruiter is also not an unintelligent person. They know what you're doing. But if you have something sizable worth mentioning, well, and that's very subjective. Worth mentioning could be any simple app also. And there's a fine line between just having one or two lines and having a 10,000 line code script or application. So anything, like, your semester projects or assignments sometimes are big enough to be mentioned there. So add them there in your GitHub repository, and if something you're genuinely interested in making, put it up there. On LinkedIn, don't post memes or just sharing random motivational fluff. Post about things that you learned. If you learn, for example, if you're learning Java programming language, right? Then any new concept that you learn, you can summarize it in few lines and post it on your timeline. You can also write a blog about it. You can have your own blog, things like that. You don't have to flaunt your achievements there. But if you, for example, if you make a project, you can mention that on your LinkedIn list. Create a post, uploaded a new project on this GitHub. This is what it does. You can grab the source here. And please feel free to contribute. Things like that are good things to post on LinkedIn and also upload on GitHub.
Got it. So another question we have is from Uswa Khan, and she's asking, when do you suggest a student should start seeking out job opportunities?
When they're in their final semester, that's the good time. They have to start preparing for interviews, maybe starting from seventh semester or even sixth semester. Data structure and algorithms is important if you're applying for software developer position. For other positions, speak to a professional, learn what's needed to clear the interview and start preparing. Last 1 year, which is 2 semesters, focus on, besides clearing your exams and completing your education, also start focusing on preparing for interview. You don't want to graduate and remain jobless for some time, unless obviously you're well off and you're not dependent on your job. But you don't want to sit home and just then prepare for interviews and then get a job 6 months later or 1 year later. You have to start preparing in last 2 semesters, figure out what's needed, build a profile. For example, if you're a graphic artist or if you're interested in program management, or if you're interested in network engineering or whatever, the field is that you're interested in, or software development, then you speak to a professional, figure out all the skills that you should be working on, building a good resume, uploading your projects. For other areas also, you can mention whatever you want to mention on different sites. Even on LinkedIn, you can post whatever things that you're working on. Start working on this, and then you can apply for jobs in the last semester. While you can start preparing even in seventh or sixth semester.
Thank you. The next question is from Zafir Ansari, and he's asking that is being an extremely good coder gets the job, or if you're not an exceptional coder, then what other skills are relevant?
Nobody is exceptional coder when they're graduating out of college, right? Even I wasn't an exceptional coder. All that matters is that you have the basic skill set, because see, for fresh graduates, the tasks that they are given are not very complicated. So you don't have to be exceptional in anything to get a job. There is some bare minimum level that you need to clear, and you will know what that level is depending on whatever field. I don't want the entire discussion to be limited to coding. Whatever field that you're interested in, right? Speak to a professional and figure out what is the minimum you need to know. Like for example, fresh graduates are not able to write a complete application end to end in the, with following all the modern coding guidelines and, writing clean code and well architecture, because that's not what they're trained for in the university anyway. So they won't be exceptional coders. For a programmer, for example, the minimum that's needed is to be able to solve uh, problems. Like in consultancy companies, sometimes they don't even give you a coding question. They just ask you questions about frameworks, and you barely need to memorize what APIs are available in certain frameworks and how do you solve problems in those frameworks. In consultancy companies, product companies, usually they ask you to write code and solve problems. So you don't have to be exceptional in anything. In order to get a job, you just need to pass the bare minimum. Obviously, your interest will drive you to try to achieve excellence over time. It's not something you come with fresh out of college or even or develop in a year or whatnot. It takes many years for a person to become exceptional in anything.
Uh, Got it. So the next question is from Azhar Ali, and he's asking that how much the internships during our BS help us get a job when we will be applying for jobs and for fresh graduates.
Internships are helpful because when you mention them on your resume, the recruiter or hiring manager knows that these people have already been in the industry. They have done some work, so they'll they'll quickly pick up whatever they need to do. Right? They're ready to go. A fresh graduate who has never been in this just industry will take more time to ramp up. So it improves your chances in being shortlisted. It gives you yourself as a professional exposure to other roles that you could potentially pick from and pick the right fit. Because a fresh graduate may not know if they're really interested in software development. They may be doing it just because everybody else in their class is doing it or somebody told them to do it, right? So having an internship gives you exposure to different roles, interacting with people in the industry. Sometimes this, if you've done really well in your job, the same company will also offer you to join them after you graduate. So depending upon how your internship goes, what you learn from it, it can be helpful. However, not every student is able to get an internship, and that's where they shouldn't feel like it's end of the world. If they can't get internship, they can read books, build projects, and do their work on their profile, mm, and have something to mention in your resume as an alternate. You don't have to be disappointed if you don't if not able to get an internship.
Got it. So the next question is from Asghar Afsal, and he's asking that how we can develop our own company, like what steps or qualities or skills or what things should we do for this?
Okay. The most important thing is for us as professionals or even students is to ask a question from somebody who's qualified to answer that question. For example, if I had my own company, if I was an entrepreneur, would be I would be the right person for asking this question, right? When you go into the field, this is one of the most important things you have to know is who to ask the question. If I give you any guidance right now, it has no weight because I do not have experience in entrepreneurship or I'm not a successful entrepreneur. So I would recommend speaking to somebody who's had their own startup, build their own company, and then ask them.
Got it. We are short on time, and I'll be taking now some of the questions you have asked. So the next question is from Ali Kumail, and he's asking that what should be done to get remote tech jobs, often listed on Stack Overflow and HackerRank for graduates.
And getting a job is similar whether it's remote or not. Make sure resume is relevant, apply to the job and let them interview you. If you clear the interview, you get the job. Like there's nothing special you have to do. You apply to the job the same way whether it's remote or not.
Okay, got it. The next question is from Abdullah Khan, and he's asking that is doing job in a big software company like Google or Amazon recommended before starting your own software house?
Just give me a second, I'll be back.
Sure, sir.
I'm sorry for that. Can you repeat the question?
Sure, sir. This guy's asking that, like, is doing job in a big software company like Google or Amazon recommended before starting your own software house?
I don't think there's a relationship with you becoming an entrepreneur or working in a big company.
Got it. Okay. So the next interesting question is from Muhammad Athar, and he's asking that at which time in your career a software developer should jump to product management, and would you like to switch your career to product manager?
Nobody should switch a career just because somebody tells them to switch a career. If you're interested in product management, then you can start right away. You don't have to switch from being a software developer to product manager. These are like different, completely different roles. There is no transition path from one to the other, a natural transition path. If you're interested in moving from one role to the other, then you move because you're not interested anymore in being a software developer or whatnot. I am personally not interested in becoming a PM at the moment, so I'm not going to think about it, or I don't plan to doing it in near future. As a software developer, you can remain software developer until you retire, or you can, sometimes the natural transition is from becoming a senior software engineer is to become a manager and whatnot. From becoming from individual contributors, people naturally transition into being a manager, not a product. PM is a different role altogether.
Got it. Sir, another important question is from Sayyid Zulfikar Banuri, and he's asking for a suggestion of a project that will have a positive impact for the students in future.
Best project is the one that you're personally interested in solving. It's not something that somebody else tells you. Figure out a problem that you're
So
interested
now
in
we'll
solving and then just solve the problem.
got it. So now we'll take last question, and this is from Muhammad Saqib Kamran. He's asking that what type of algorithm questions are asked from freshers during interview, and can you tell one, for instance, also from where and how should we prepare?
Read the book Cracking the Coding Interview, and or you can read the book Elements of Programming Interviews. That will give you an idea, or just Google typical interview questions. You'll find plenty of them.
Thank you, sir. Last but not the least, a question from Maz. He's asking that I assume you've been in the industry for about 13 years. What did you learn about the ever emerging software industry rituals or practices that were not taught or experienced during your academic years?
There are plenty of things that currently that are not taught in the schools. Is, for example, testing your software, deploying it properly, maintaining it, how to find bugs in software, debugging skills, and maintaining software uh, that's in the production. Um, being an on-call engineer, there's so many things. Writing clean code, right? Managing commitments, estimation of, how do you estimate how long it's going to take? What do you do if the you know project is delayed? How to communicate the changes and requirements or whatnot. The whole practical experience of software development is much different than what's being taught in the universities, because obviously there's a disconnect between academia and the professional industry. That's where having an internship helps, and it also helps to do some reading on your own, like reading books. There are plenty of books. So Google has published some books on software engineering practices. Contributing in open source community also helps. Contributing to a open source project on GitHub, sending a pull request will give you exposure to some of that. Also, doing code reviews, handling code review feedback, performance reviews is something that you don't know how they work, and how do you manage your performance, and doing the performance reporting at the end of the year or mid-year, whatnot. There are so many things that you learn only when you're in the industry. But it doesn't have to be this way. You can start studying on your own. Follow professionals on LinkedIn. Don't waste time following people that are on same level as you. Like, you don't have to follow your classmates. They're students. They don't have much to teach you. You can follow industry professionals who've been in the industry, hiring managers, whatnot, learn from them. If they mention a book, read a book if you have time. If your primary focus should be on finishing your education properly and understanding what you're learning already. But besides that, if you have, we all have extra time, so you can read books on engineering and try to get some practical experience by either contributing to open source projects or doing an internship. That's where you'll get the exposure to so many things.
Thanks a lot, Sir Hassan, for your precious time and for this very great and fruitful session.
You're welcome, Jazakallah khair, for inviting me here. I hope this was helpful. If anybody has any more questions, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. You don't have to say hi, hello, or anything like that, or ask me to ask a question. You can just simply message me and briefly explain whatever your question is directly in a single message. Inshallah, I'll try to respond to it. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If you don't have my email, I'll type it here. You can send me a connection request and you can message me on LinkedIn as well. All right. Take care and may Allah
Right,
give you
sir.
all success
Thank you for
and
coming. It
in your
was
careers.
quite an honor. Ameen.
You're welcome.
Exactly.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for this fruitful session for the student of university. And the LinkedIn profile link of Sir Hassan has been sent in the message box. You may use it to connect with them. And the feedback form link has also been shared. And you guys are requested to please fill it as well. Thank you.
All right. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you, sir. Walaikum assalam. All right, guys. So that is it for today. Hassan, final remarks for the attendees.
I want to just thank these guys who just participated and make this session a success. And I hope that you guys learned something. And this was a very fruitful discussion out here.
Indeed, mashallah. Thank you, guys. Have a good day and see you all in the next semester, inshallah. And Allah Hafiz.